I'm here today with Barney Greenway of Napalm Death to talk about the upcoming mini album, Resentment is Always Seismic, out February 11th on Century Media. How are you doing today?
Yeah, I'm all right, not too bad. A bit of an interview schedule, so it's always nice to talk to people. Yeah, so in amongst a set of not so great personal issues, it's been a good day, so.
Well, before we start talking about this record, I want to ask you a little bit about the tour that you guys did in North America at the end of last year with War. I was at the Toronto show, and I want to ask you, how did that tour go for you guys? How did you
very good.
The reception was?
Yeah, very good. Obviously, I think maybe a slightly different tour for us in what people are used to. But, there are parallels with the kind of satirical edge to the band, and the kind of commentary, I suppose, that both bands have. But yeah, it was good. There was definitely people that came to the shows that that seemed to enjoy us, that wouldn't have even probably known who Napalm Death were. So there's definitely a little bit of that. So that's always good, if you can have that sort of positive, leave people with that kind of positive thoughts about your band, So yeah, it was good. And the Guar guys were like really great. They treated us really nicely, how you'd expect to be treated, as fellow human beings, I suppose. They were really nice. So
your show in Toronto was really special. You guys played a much longer set. It was just Napalm Death and War. It was the first show in Toronto for a touring band since the pandemic had started. Did you guys feel the energy of the audience for that very specific performance due to all the circumstances that surrounded it?
Well, I think gigs are gigs wherever you go in the world at the end of the day. I've never been a person to like separate out people from different places, because all the people in every town have something to give, so that's the most important thing. But I will say that Canada has always had maybe an extra edge to it a little bit in some ways, and yeah, it was like that. You could tell that people hadn't seen anything, at least the people that went to that gig, by and large, for a long time, I mean, I'm led to believe that gig was the first one at that particular venue. I'm not sure if I understood it correctly or whether they meant it was wider.
It was the first one in the city. It was the first one in that venue, and it was one of the first ones in the city as far as metal is concerned, and since the pandemic had started. So all the people that were there, that was probably their first show in 2 years.
Oh, wow. Right. I didn't realize that, actually. Yeah, that's something, I suppose, Yeah, I felt it. What you say is quite accurate. I could definitely feel the energy was kind of crackling a little bit,
So now getting into this mini album, when did the idea for this record start to take shape for you guys?
Well, to be honest, just the idea of a mini album itself has been there for a long time. It's one of those things that we discussed, but you kind of discuss it every now and again, but you don't really do anything. And then one day you just do. And that's really how it is. I mean, the idea really was to do it in, like, for me at least, it was like back in the day when you used to go to underground gigs, punk and hardcore gigs usually, and a band that you really liked, you'd be kind of digging through the racks at the store that was there, and you'd see, oh shit, a new thing. I didn't even see this coming. I never even heard about it. Nothing. It was never on the grapevine or nothing like that. So for me, that was kind of the idea, to just literally almost like slapping something on the table, and going, there you go, So, and the reason why it happened was because whenever Napalm Death records an album, we've always got extra tracks, because as is the case with a lot of bands, the people that buy the album in the very early days of a release, they don't need to do that. They could wait, and get it cheaper down the line. But so I think it's good to give people extra stuff, that do that, So we, even after accounting for those extra tracks, though, we found we had a bunch of stuff left over, enough to do like an EP or a mini album, as it turned out. So that's what we did. We talked about it. We were like, well, everything's fallen into place. Let's do it. So we did.
Did you guys have a goal in mind in terms of what you wanted the sound to be on this mini album? Because I feel like there's a lot of diversity when you look at the original material, when you look at the covers, the way you guys put it all together. It's very diverse in sound. It almost feels like a compilation of sorts. So did you guys have a goal in mind in order to have the record?
Well, I think, Pedro, that if you listen to Napalm Death albums, certainly in the last few years, you can feel it more, I think. We've never been ones for singular production. You know, if you've got songs on an album with different expressions and different things coming in and out, why just have a singular production? What's the point? You know, that's kind of not making the most of what you've got. You know, so I would say that if you take the album itself, that's a good example of exactly what you've said. So as it follows, so are the tracks on this mini album. You know, it's from the same session, you know, and of course, because it was part of the same session, even though they weren't mastered, they were mixed, you know, they were produced and mixed. So the level of production is there. It's no different to the album. So and they're different songs, you know. I mean, a Bad Brains cover that we've done on the album is going to be different from the Slab cover because it's two different areas of extreme music, you know, that you're dealing with. So you produce accordingly, you know.
Yeah, it definitely had the vibe of a continuation more so than just a new element. I mean, there's a little bit of a new element, but there's definitely a continuation from the previous record. Now, when you're putting a mini album together, do you approach it almost the way you would approach a full-length record, or you approach it more with the mindset of an EP? Because I feel like those two kind of come together differently.
Yeah, I mean, you know, one person's mini album is another person's EP, you know what I mean? So it's much the same. We approached it the same in that it's got to be just always with the thing in mind that it has to be the best that it can be, 100%, nothing less. So therefore, when we did the track listing for the mini album in terms of the order, it would be no less of a consideration than whether we did a regular album, because obviously it's all subjective, but if once we feel that it flows, that it seems to flow in a good way, then that's great, you know. It's really that. It's that simple. And with the artwork, you know, although it was a mini album, we wanted to make it uncluttered and uncomplicated. Still, the artwork had to be, in our eyes, have a sufficient quality. You know, be portray what it needed to portray, be well considered, to have impact, and that's what we did. You know, that's what we tried to achieve similarly, you know.
I find it really interesting that you mentioned the construction, because coming in, before I heard any song, coming in, I thought it was going to be more chaotic. It was going to be like a little bit all over the place. You guys just threw some songs in together because it has a little bit of that EP vibe to it. But then when you start listening to it, the flow is really incredible. And how you guys place the covers, it's also really interesting because you kind of mixed in with original material covers, which kind of blended in the whole experience of going from the first all the way to the last song. Is that something that you guys spent quite a bit of time?
No, we've always liked to do that, and there's a good associated point with that, Pedro. Now, when we do Napalm Death albums and we put extra tracks on, the ones I was talking about for the initial release, we don't just stick them on the end. We'll include them in the track listing with the other tracks, because if it flows better with that extra track in a certain place, then that's what we'll do. We don't just tack them onto the end, you know, we actually structure them, you know, in terms of the rest of the album. So similarly to what you're talking about, just because they're covers, if you're going to do a cover, you want it to have impact. It's got to. It shouldn't just feel only like, oh, I'm just playing these people's songs because I like it from before. You know, it should still have a thrust to it. You know, it should still have that whatever edge you need it to have, you know. So therefore, given that, why just tack it, all the covers, however many covers you've done, just at the end, you know, just mix it in. You know, if it flows with everything else, just mix it in, you know, it's fine.
Yeah, I thought it was a lot better. It made me feel more like a record and less like I said, an EP. It had more substance.
Yeah, I get that. But thanks. That's good to hear.
Now, from the original material, since it was part of the original session from the previous record, what was it about these songs that you guys felt at the time didn't have room in that record, but were still good enough, obviously, for you guys to release them later?
Yeah, just purely that they just, after the considerations of the track listing for the album, they just didn't fall in there, you know, just one of them things, you know. I don't think they're any lesser. They just didn't figure into the thing at the time. I mean, maybe I know this might sound a bit cheesy, but maybe you can use a football analogy. You might have a fantastic football player on the books, you know, but if they don't fit into the team at the time, then they're going to be sitting on the bench. You know what I mean? Same with this, you know. There's nothing wrong with any of those tracks. There's nothing, to us at least, there's nothing second division about them, you know. So given that, they just didn't come into the thinking at the time, you know.
Did the covers become part of the picture when you guys decided to put this mini album together, or did you guys already have them?
No, they were there. They were there in the thing, yeah. All the tracks that you hear, apart from the remix track, the noise track that we did at the end. Everything was done during the session itself, you know.
What was about these two covers that were special enough that you guys wanted to give it your own little flavor to them?
Just that, you know, that we just wanted to do. I mean, the Bad Brains, of course, is a touchstone band, you know, for punk and hardcore. Yeah, and so, you know, people might say, well, you could have done 100 other bands' tracks. Of course we could, but we just happened to pick the Bad Brains, you know. It's that simple. As for Slab, if you'll notice about that track, it has a lot of different flavors.
Yes.
Some of it is pushing the envelope for Napalm Death in terms of us representing that song. It's pushing the envelope a bit for us, even though we've pushed it quite a lot in the past. It's pushing it a little bit further. So it's a double-edged thing, really. First of all, great band, cult band. Not a lot of people know about them unless you're kind of familiar with that little scene. But we really love them. Shane's like really loved them for years and years and years, and always said we should do that song and do that cover. But of course, much like the discussions about the mini album, now we finally got around to doing it, you know. So it's just that, really. Songs that we thought were great and just deserved a scene to, as it were, you know, so for want of a better phrase.
Were you surprised on how far you guys took that song? Because I thought musically, you guys extended what we came to expect from Napalm Death on that track, not just musically, but vocally as well. So
sure.
Were you a little bit surprised with the end result?
Speaking for me as the vocalist on that track, no, because you know what? I love doing that stuff, that kind of, it's very sort of 80s, early, got Bauhaus, actually, those kind of vocals. Although the guy from Slab probably wasn't going for that. The way I would express it, it kind of sounds like early Bauhaus and that sort of stuff, which for me is definitely big influence on my vocals, you know, especially more and more as time goes on, you know, which is never to detract from the chaotic screaming and shouting that I do, not at all. But this is just an extra string to the bow, you know, that you can employ at times. So yeah, I was really pleased with the way it turned out. And I should mention as well, you know, because it deserves mentioning, that Catherine, the singer that did the female voice, and they absolutely fucking blew it out of the park. You know, I mean,
I was blown away. I was blown away for two reasons. One, I wasn't really expecting it, and two, her voice was phenomenal.
She's like an opera singer, yeah, like a proper opera singer, you know.
I felt that it added so much flavor. Her tone, her voice, the warmth that she has in her voice.
Yeah.
Almost like a little bit of a cabaret vibe to it at sometimes when it was coming across. It worked so well. And then you on top of that, it was such an interesting song that it almost forced me to replay it and not continue listening to the album and just listen to it again. Because
I was really pleased with the results, you know, and I mean, it's great to do stuff like that. But it's not a departure in the sense that, oh, you left the extremity behind, because that track in itself and the original is harsh. You know, the bass sounds on there, although it's quite dancey, it's very harsh, you know, in the way it was, the sound of the instrumentation and the way it was produced as well, you know. So yeah, it's certainly extreme, you know. Still, it doesn't lose that.
Are any of the songs on this mini album going to be part of a future set list for you guys? I know you guys have a tour, it was postponed, but next time you guys hit the road?
Yeah, I would hope so. I mean, obviously we'll have a talk about that, you know, but yeah, I've always been of the mind that when you put stuff out, new stuff, you should do something at least, you know. Obviously in the context of the Throes of Joy album is still very much like a live thing, alive as such in people's minds. You know, if you're going to do an 8-track mini album, play 1 track, 2 tracks maybe, you know. Of course for my own part, certainly, you know, I'd definitely be into that, you know. So.
One last question for you is as you release this mini album, I'm sure you guys are already looking forward to the next full-length album. How much of the work or the guidelines or the roadmap of that full length down the road do you guys already have in place?
See, this is the thing, Pedro. Spontaneity is the key with Napalm Death, and I can't tell you whether whichever aspects people recognise in the last album will be part of the new album. It's certainly, I would think that we'll take what we did on Throes and just move it further ahead, whilst maintaining the abrasiveness and the extremity. Has to, for me personally, you know, it can't never lose that, you know, it always has to have that. It might go in other directions as those, you know, that extra ingredients. I really don't know yet. I mean, I don't, you know, we don't. It's just, it'll happen when it happens, and yeah, we'll see, you know.
On that note, I want to finish this by saying thank you to you and the band for coming to Toronto during this pandemic, playing that show with War. You made our lives slightly better in the middle of misery.
Thanks, man. Yeah, and of course we appreciate people coming out, you know, because it's been a rough 2 years, and you know, people aren't always confident going out to things at this moment in time, you know. So it was a beautiful thing, you know. The whole tour, you know, was great. So
yeah, it was beautiful seeing you guys. It was my first time seeing you guys live, so I'm able to check that off my bucket list. I finally saw.
Right, yeah.
Seeing you under those circumstances was really special. I saw people crying in the audience. I saw people hugging each other. It was a moment of togetherness, and you guys were able to provide us with that. So
yeah, it's always nice to see humanity in action, you know what I mean? That's what I'll say about that, you know.
Yeah, it's a beautiful thing. Thank you very much. Best of luck with the release.
Thanks, Pedro. All the best. Nice to see you again. I remember.
Yeah, it's always a pleasure talking to you. So I'm always looking forward for you guys to release some new material so we have a reason to chat.
Sure. All right, Pedro.
Take care. All the best.
All the best, my friend. Take it easy.
You too.
Bye-bye.